Hi, Bother Brigade. Here's what's bothering me today. I know there have been a few core stories that have been going around that we've also been focusing on lately on this channel, and while we could easily do a bunch more about that, we're not really going to do that today. It's, Sunday, right? Which means it's time for the Sunday Sum Up, and we cover all the stories that people have probably very much missed over the past week and spare change of days. So with that said, welcome to the Sunday Sum Up, everyone, and fair warning, we are in for a bit of a ride. So let's talk about unspent money real quick. According to recently released federal data, states are sitting on $5.2 billion in unspent funds from the Federal Temporary Assistance for Needy Families program, or TANF. We actively don't give poor people who are eligible the money meant to help them. So fucking pissed. By the way, yes, I get one of those stories is shared about someone supposedly not meeting the standard, but keep in mind, in the same way minimum wage has not kept up with the actual cost of living, most benefit programs also have not been keeping up. There's a huge gap and it's growing. TANF acceptance rates have steadily declined over the past few years, with some states, Texas, Mississippi, Arkansas, and Nebraska, denying about 90% of applicants in fiscal year 2020, according to federal data. We're helping less people as time goes on. Less. This is evil. And we wonder why poor people get increasingly incensed and pissed off about everything and like, oh, the poor people keep getting money. Clearly they aren't. Like, no matter where you sit on the spectrum, that's just objectively not true. They're not getting money and the cost of living is going up. And even though there are people who, could qualify for this, including likely some neighbors you might have if you're a poor, disaffected, working class person in America, those people who could still qualify are not getting it because of shitheel Republicans thinking, oh no, we shouldn't, come on, just get a job, even though these people are probably working. The whole situation is actually so incredibly messed up. Again, as mainly Mandy points out, over time, less people are being helped, even though there are still literally billions of dollars in funding set aside to help Americans. What? Oh, right, but speaking of helping Americans, how's that going? A toddler burned his hand on the stove, so his parents took him to the ER. But after a long wait for a doctor who never showed up, they went home and the burn healed on its own. Then the hospital sent them a bill for $1,012. Are you fucking kidding me? So they go to the ER and there's no doctor there to see them, so they kind of, give up and go home, meaning they haven't actually used the services, right? They've just gone in to the hospital, haven't really taken or used anything. They've just walked in, sat down and waited, and then eventually left because there was no doctor to help, the child with a burn, which, that should say something about the state of the best healthcare system ever, by the way. But, they go home and then they still get a bill from the hospital charging them $1,000 for sitting in a chair for a few hours. What the actual goddamn fuck? They absolutely should challenge that bill, and that is just such a typical example of the horror show that is American Medicare. Which, speaking of American Medicare and just America in general and its handling of the pandemic, so long, Omicron. White House eyes next phase of pandemic. Biden and his top health officials have already begun hinting at a new normal. Meanwhile, the United States reported 3,958 COVID deaths yesterday. Literally more people are dying every day because of just incredible malpractice by American leadership every day than in 9/11. And there's a culture war around this because masks and vaccines, it is all so stupid. And then there's another story from across the pond. Actually, we are going to kind of go back and forth a bit on this because it was just stuff that I saw and just put away, and now we're just going through the hits from the past few weeks, basically. But content warning for this next story because it involves mentions of abuse and child abuse and sexual abuse and molestation. So yeah, content warning for all those things. Former BBC Panorama director, 76, found with 832 child abuse images avoids jail after judge said his poor health would make prison particularly challenging during pandemic. Fuck that noise. This guy is a piece of shit. Put him in jail. So what if he dies of COVID? Nothing of value will have been lost? Hello? That's just another instance of the rich having a completely separate set of rules for themselves. Never mind, the average working person, right? Oh, and by the way, quick other little tidbit of information from across the pond. Prime Minister Boris Johnson is in a lot of hot water over parties that happened when Brits were supposed to be locked down. And so, of course, that's the thing that brings him down, right? It's not the myriad of things that should have rightfully brought down that absolute fucking clown. Instead, it's about, he got to have a party and we didn't, so he must go. Like, okay, you know what? Whatever it takes to get him gone, but at the same time, like, really? Really? But while that's part of the whole national circus over there's another story that has gotten very much lost in the weeds. Breaking, the same MPs who sadly had no choice but to raise your national insurance have just voted to give bankers a massive tax cut. You really couldn't make it up. Yeah, the MPs, the notoriously corrupt, Tories over in Britain, decided, oh, you know what? Sorry, folks, we have no choice but to raise your insurance rates. Please pay no attention to the fact that we gave banks who already have had a, massive, stellar, profitable set of years due to the pandemic, we're giving them an even more massive tax cut. Pay no attention to that. Pay no attention to the millions upon billions of pounds that they are raking in, that we are going to tax even less while downloading the cost onto you, the already struggling average Brit. By the way, we support the working class. Fuck off. So yeah, that's another little story from Britain that's been very much lost in the sauce of everything else. But bring it back to America real quick, there's something going on out in Hawaii. Well, actually, a couple things. I've talked about before on this channel about the fact that tourists were being given water while Native Hawaiians weren't. So that was really particularly messed up. Well, in a completely different story, but still related to the fact that Hawaii is basically a colonized state under US occupation, Silver Spook had this to tell us. Reminder, the US military still refuses to deal with jet fuel in our Hawaiian aquifer, still poisoning my family, and now the US is suing Hawaii to keep leaking gas in our water. Yeah, so what he's talking about there, as you can see in the quoted image of US government sues Hawaii over order to defuel Red Hill facility, that's a facility that's basically used for storing gas for the US Pacific Fleet, basically. And so what's happened is that infrastructure, it's near some very poor areas. Many of them tend to be indigenous families, right? So what ends up happening is this fuel and other chemicals contaminate the water and also the groundwater that seeps in through down into the aquifers and stuff. And so what's happening is people are they're taking showers and then suddenly they're getting rashes they can't even see because they're having an allergic response to all these chemicals in the fuel. So they can't drink their water, they can't use it, they can't shower with it, they can't do laundry or anything like that. And they have been pushing back, right? Locals have understandably been pushing back on this, and instead the US government is suing the state after the state finally started listening to its residents saying, okay, yeah, we should maybe kind of fix this problem that's kind of a serious health issue. The US government is suing the state of Hawaii for trying to do the right thing after already hundreds of families have been negatively impacted by what's going on at Red Hill. And by the way, side note, please go support Silver Spook and his content. He does streams on Twitch. They're very great, funny, and informative. He's also got this game out called Neo Feud. Go support Indigenous creators. He's a Hawaiian man giving us all the deets about the utter gong show that is Hawaii and US occupation of those islands. Oh, and speaking of fuel and chemicals and just wasteful climate stuff, I got a little bit of bad news from Africa. An oil production ship exploded off the coast of Nigeria. But come on, this is the only thing we've ever known. So what if this is hurting people and slowly killing the planet and also us as a civilization? Who cares? People got money to make and change is too hard. It's too hard to do incremental changes, which is why it's going to really suck when we have to do the immediate changes within the next decade. Yay! But my stock portfolio, that was super more important than the lives of 7+ billion people. You understand that, right? Also, I'm pretty sure there's something floating around on the internet right now, not sure entirely how true it is, but it's an image alleging that if we actually switch to renewables, 50% of the ships would no longer be traveling the seas because they're just shipping coal, oil, and gas. Which, if true, that's just a sign of the terrible problem and neoliberalism and all the fraught terrors that come from that. And speaking of new terrors, remember those cute little robot dogs? And then we saw that the NYPD were using them, and people were rightfully very mad about that. And then we saw that a similar maker of robot dogs put guns on the back of them. Well, now Border Patrol is getting these robot dogs. DHS and Border Patrol are working together to eventually deploy ghost robotics dogs on the border in particular desert terrain. Terminator dogs will supposedly act as a force multiplier for CBP and patrols and interdiction. I'm sorry, Terminator dogs? Like, I am so fucking tired of living in a dystopia that doesn't need to exist. So, I'm not sure entirely if they mean Terminator dogs is just the name of it, or those are also the ones that will have, you know, the guns on the back of them and they just shoot migrants, or they sabotage the water that Good Samaritans leave out in the desert for people trying to cross through the desert, which is notoriously difficult and deadly, by the way. So yeah, now we got robot dogs on the hunt for desperate humans. I see no way in which this comes back to be a further dystopian nightmare in the future climate crisis about 10 years from now, when there's more of these things, and some have guns or snipers on the back of them, and there's no real oversight or awareness of things, and yeah, that's gonna be neat. But Biden said he was going to change things, which is why this is also a unfortunately grimly, you know, decent time to remind people that kids are still in cages on the goddamn border. Biden still hasn't fixed that, by the way. But you know, Biden's following through, right? He's actually been a half-decent president, right? That's why he did the following. The Biden administration just moved to overturn a rare victory for a student loan borrower in bankruptcy court. On the campaign trail, Biden had promised to make it easier for people to reduce their student debt through bankruptcy proceedings. Like, the dude said he was going to make it easier, and now he's directly challenging that. Dude is so keen and quick to break his own promises, it's honestly kind of impressive. But remember, folks, vote blue no matter who. But anyway, this next story has a bit of a silver lining to it, to an extent, right? Amazon burns through workers so quickly that executives are worried they'll run out of people to employ, according to a new report. Yeah, okay, so this will make sense, and it's a sign of a greater problem, and just capitalism running into the own problems that it naturally inherently has, and being unable and unwilling to address them because it's counter to the capitalist screed of must make profit line only go up. So here's the gist of what you need to know. Amazon has been hiring hundreds of thousands of workers for roles in its warehouses, which it calls fulfillment centers. But those employees have been quitting almost as fast as they can be hired, according to a huge report from the New York Times published on Tuesday. Many of the over 350,000 workers Amazon hired from July to October stayed with the company just days or weeks, the report said. Hourly employees had a turnover rate of about 150% every year, data reviewed by the Times indicated. That led some Amazon executives to worry about running out of hireable employees in the US, the report said. So Amazon's working conditions are so terrible, and their main business model was, fuck it, people are desperate, so we'll just hire new people. And so yeah, that's been all well and good until the point that basically, because of the high turnover rate, they're running out of people to hire that have already cycled through Amazon at least once, right? And we're gonna come back to this. I just want to leave with a bit of the silver lining before I unfortunately go to like the thunderstorm that comes after this, or likely comes after this, because I recognize we live in a dystopia. So they're running out of hireable people in the variety of areas where they have fulfillment centers. And okay, so what are they going to do? Are they actually going to fix their labor practices? Most definitely not. That's not how Amazon works. So, where else do places seek to get cheap, exploitable labor that has no choice but to do the work? If the first thought in your mind was prisons and the prison industrial complex, congratulations, you win an internet cookie. My fear from this story, right, is that it's not going to lead to them recognizing, oh, maybe we should change things, roll some things back. We're still raking in a ton of profit. We should change how we hire and keep people on so that we can actually build a solid workforce rather than just a desperate workforce. That's what a normal, sane, non-sociopathic person or company would do. But this is Amazon we're talking about. They are absolutely going to start shopping around to any local jails and prisons that are around the areas saying, hey, so we need prisoners to, come in and like do the store, work in the fulfillment centers. Not like they're going to really give drivers that job or opportunity, because, you know, they may just become getaway drivers and steal all the stuff. But in terms of, oh yeah, you gotta work in the very dangerous Amazon fulfillment centers with like no bathroom breaks, etc., and you're a prisoner, so you don't have rights in America, and it's basically a form of legalized slavery. That is unfortunately what is going to likely happen if and when Amazon reaches this critical point. I would like to believe otherwise, but let's be brutally honest with ourselves and our shared reality here. So yay! That was the Sunday sum up south of the border and across the pond real quick. Let's stop in for Canada for a quick second. So there's a whole bunch of just like disinformation and craziness going on around the various different trucker convoys, especially the trucker convoy that has basically just completely taken over downtown Ottawa. We're gonna come back to that in like different videos in the future, but there is something about like some people supporting the truckers convoy that I did want to briefly touch on, because it was wild as hell to see because of just how disconnected from the actual reality it is, even though, you know, and I'm going to get into sort of why it's kind of sympathetic and understanding. My 1-year-old can't have her surgery because of these ridiculous mandates. I stand on guard for her. So, couple things here, lady. This is clearly, right, it's coming from a place of love and concern for one's child. I get that. That's understandable. That's entirely valid. But the leap in logic is what she has on the sign right there. My 1-year-old can't get surgery because of the vaccine mandates? The mask mandate? Like what? So first off, right, we aren't really doing the whole vaccine for kids under 5, at least not right now, because again, they're still being, you know, cautious with the ongoing research and available data from the vaccines and any after effects, etc., etc. That's why there was the rolling out of the vaccine in a very different way to get it out to people quickly, as opposed to the usual 5 to 10 year timeline for vaccines, because they were kind of doing it as they went along. So that's part of why we're still holding off on that. But the other thing, right, is, you know, my daughter can't have her surgery. Why can't she have her surgery? Is it because of vaccine mandates, or is she mad because her little 1-year-old hasn't gotten the initial like round of shots that babies are supposed to get? So that's a separate issue of the anti-vax bit, right? That could be a possibility, but we don't know. So I'm just saying, keep that in your mind, but we don't know that that's actually the case here. So let's look at the other things that we know are objectively true about the situation. The vast majority of people taking up ICUs right now are people who are unvaxxed. That is the problem. So people having their surgeries canceled are because of anti-vaxxers and careless people through the pandemic, whether they believe it's a hoax or, oh, it's just the flu, which again, see that previous video I did about why it's definitely not just the flu. And so it all circles back to, oh, my 1-year-old can't have her surgery because of these mandates. Your 1-year-old can't have surgery because of the people you are openly supporting here, making it more difficult to get back to the normal everyone wants to get to. Out of your very valid and understandable concern as a parent, and you want to do something about that, you are missing the forest for the trees, and rather unfortunately and deeply disturbingly ironically, you are just contributing to the longer wait times for your own child to get surgery. Your actions and beliefs are negatively impacting your own child. And that's what a lot of this stuff boils down to, right? With the anti-vax mandates, the trucker convoys, etc. It's all basically just a grift. Most of the money came from Americans, which is why we're seeing like Florida Republicans, for God's sakes, trying to investigate GoFundMe, and the Texas Attorney General saying, hey, look, many proud Texans donated to try and cause an insurrection in Canada. It's like, mask off moment there, dude. Fuck off, mind your damn business. Don't overthrow your like most valuable neighbor ally. Like what? But a lot of these people who are being misled by just the sheer amount of disinformation, it also comes from them understandably suffering through the pandemic because there are no support systems in place, and those that are either crumbling, impossible to navigate, or barely existent. So people are being told, oh, I need to self-isolate. Well, guess what? My landlord isn't really giving me a break. I got, you know, I need to put a roof over my head for me, my kids, or like my mother, my sick elderly aunt, whoever it is, right? It's a fucking nightmare. And so people understandably are like, this is so crazy, this is dumb, this is stupid, we got to get back to normal. But unfortunately, they're buying into all the lies and propaganda of the right that are being misled by a bunch of rich sociopaths that want to overthrow democratically elected governments because they don't agree with them and they don't agree with science and an objective reality. But the anger of the people is completely understandable because they have been left with nothing, right? Especially in America. Wow, thank you so much for the $600 check and then the $1,400 top up over 2 long, excruciating years of little to no actual support and help, rising costs and prices, being unable to self-isolate due to, too many people in too many crowded areas and not enough information and not enough support and PPE, etc., etc. And so, I understand it, right? People through no fault of their own are struggling with their businesses and their livelihoods because governments under this neoliberal capitalist nightmare refuse to fundamentally take care of the people. And so they get mad and they want to lash out, and fucking incompetent right-wing grifters who openly lie about all this stuff tell them what they want to hear. They provide an easy answer and an easy out, and that leads to the unfortunate situation like this mother where she thinks that the mandates are what's preventing her child from getting surgery rather than the spectacular failures of a capitalist system and neoliberal governments that operate within that space. And it is so incredibly sad and depressing, but not as sad as the final story that we have from today north of the border. Between all this talk of the truckers and the convoys and how they're basically allowed to get away with stuff that Black and Indigenous people could only ever dream of being able to do freely without immediately being killed by cops. Aside from all of that, right, what's getting lost in the noise is that we continue to find dead bodies of children in unmarked graves at the sites of former residential schools across this country. And as more investigations are done and more records opened up, we are finding out even more horrifying details. Just in case anyone forgot about it, on Tuesday, Williams Lake First Nation announced the findings of their investigation at St. Joseph's Mission Residential School. What they shared was a lot more than a number of children's bodies found by ground radar. And there's a thread, and I'm not going to go through it because it is dark. And I mean dark. It is some of the worst instances of humanity's potential for evil laid bare for all to see. And we've already had a pretty crazy couple weeks, and there's still a lot of craziness out there. I don't need to depress and horrify people anymore. The link will be down below. Read it at your own caution. Just and I'm not even kidding here. All the content warnings, all the trigger warnings for sexual abuse, physical abuse, rape, murder. It is, like I said, incredibly dark. So if you do want to read that, that will be available down below. But we're not doing that here because no one needs that. Instead, what people need is some help. So here you can see the various different numbers for hotlines. You have the Indigenous Residential School Survivor reception email. You also have their 1-800 number. There's also a 24-hour number. There's the Native Youth Crisis line, another line which I cannot pronounce, so I'm not even going to try. First Nations and Inuit Hope for Wellness, crisis services, and of course, the Kids Helpline. I know I have some Indigenous followers and subscribers here, and so that's also part of why, we don't need to reopen that trauma. But if you do need help, I sincerely hope that you do reach out and that at least one, if not more, of these numbers will be useful to you. And I also encourage people to support the various organizations that are doing this good work and supporting the survivors of residential schools. And normally there's kind of a theme that emerges from all this stuff, but there really isn't. This is just me trying to find stories that were just cast to the wayside while other bigger, crazier, more obnoxious stories came to the forefront. But it shows that there are still very real people being affected, and we are leaving them behind and we are ignoring them. And that just feels wrong to me, and it's part of why I do this channel and why I also thank all of you for being here and getting through this with me, both on the Sunday Sum Up and for various other videos that may shed a light on something, people learn something, or they realize I had no idea that this was going on. They bring awareness, they learn more about history. So thank you all for being here. And so on that note, I want to say that while there's no theme, there is still a message. Because while this is, again, a very difficult episode in many ways to try and get through, we've also talked recently about hope and opportunity and communities coming together. And that's really what it always boils down to, right? Even with the abdication of leadership by, police and actual federal governments, people in communities, they want to take care of themselves because that's the community. That is at the heart of the human experience, whether we fully recognize that or not. And for whatever happens, that's the way out, and that's where we can at least get some comfort, some familiarity, and also, when times are darkest, some support. That's what's happening across the country. It's happening across the world. As I've shown before with all our various good stories from the past few months, we actually do have reason to be hopeful and optimistic, but we also need to be aware of what's going on so that we can fight back against it. But unfortunately, there is so much misinformation and disinformation out there that it makes it a far more difficult task than it ever needs to be, and that's what's bothering me today.